Well, let's dive into it this morning. Make sure I'm on track. I'm on track. All right, let's go. Well, we're going to continue. We got one more week in Simply Jesus. Oh, it's my dad. Classic. So no, the reason why it's funny is because before service we were telling multiple people like, "Hey, silence your phone, silence your phone, silence your phone." You're good, Dad. I love you, and I know you. So we got one more week in this. Next week I'm out of town. My sister's wedding is on Sunday, so even if I wanted to just book it, I wouldn't make it on time. And so I will not be here. My family will not be here next week. And so pray for us as we travel. There's nothing I love more than going to the East Coast and driving out there. And that's not for real. I hate it. I hate driving on the East Coast anymore. I'm now a Midwestern driver, and it goes anyway. This morning, I want to just open by talking about a story that happened this past week with Caleb. So Caleb, if you don't know this about him, he becomes obsessive over specific things because he just gets excited. And so for sometimes it's a video series, sometimes it's a toy, sometimes like today he's just walking around on a string Matchbox Hot Wheels car and calling it a fake pet. It's just who Caleb is. He just gets into it and he's going. But on Monday, he was gifted this squid that I believe Linda actually made for him. He was gifted this squid, and he was getting ready for bed, and his squid was his thing that day. He wanted his squid, and he was getting ready for bed, and he forgot where Squiddy was. He calls his squid Squiddy. He forgot where Squiddy was, and so everybody's in bed, and Caleb comes to our room, and he's like, Mommy, Daddy, I don't know where Squiddy is, and I want to know where Squiddy is before I go to bed. And I was like, well, have you checked the bathroom? Have you checked where all these places? He goes, no, I'll go check there. And so he would go and he would check the one location and he'd come back. And he'd go and he'd check the other location and he'd come back. And literally, he just one place at a time and he'd come back and check in. Hey, Squiddy wasn't there. And then we hit this point where I realized, I was like, you know what? You went outside today and played with friends. Did you take Squiddy outside, even though I've told you multiple times, don't take stuffed animals outside? And he goes, I did. I was like, okay, well, here's the deal. I don't want to get out of bed. So you have 2 minutes. You can go outside, only in our backyard. Don't go wandering. You can look around for 2 minutes. You can come back inside. He goes out. He comes back in. He says, Squiddy, I didn't see him on the patio. He's not there. Okay, well, you know what, buddy? We'll look for Squiddy in the morning. And he just begins to break down. And I go, do you want to find Squiddy? He goes, yeah, will you help me? I go, okay. So we grab the flashlights and we head out into the dark. And on the way downstairs, I say, you were in Addie's yard yesterday. Did you take Squiddy over there? And he goes, I did. Now he didn't. But at that point, he's so desperate that he will do anything to find Squiddy, right? This past week, when I was at camp, this is a fun story. Last week at camp, I was driving my golf cart through the parking lot, and I see this girl, and I may have shared this on Sunday, but I'm just going to remind you if I didn't, and I've had a lot of things happen, so I don't know what I've shared anymore. I had this girl, and this girl's room leader stop me in the parking lot, and she goes, hey, I know you don't do room checks, but are you aware of something that happened in our room? No. I don't know what happened in your room. She's like, well, we were doing a wedding theme for our room, and we had put out 2 rings, and I'm looking for one of them. And I go, okay. Now at this point, I'm thinking in my mind, why in the world would you put out rings during room checks? For those of you who don't know what a room check is, students can earn points for their teams by how clean and how creative their room is, and so they had decorated their room in the theme of a wedding. But here's the deal. All the students clear out of the dorms, and then when everything calms down, all the students start to come back in. So I'm thinking to myself, why would you put anything of value in your room when you don't know who's going to be the first one back in the dorms? Beside the point. Then this girl looks at me with the most serious expression she could and said, one of them was my grandmother's ring. And I go, oh. She's like, I've looked all over the room. I've looked in my neighboring rooms, and I haven't heard anything. And we know that you're in charge. I go, you're right. And when it came to Caleb, so Caleb, when I come downstairs and we had brought the flashlights, and I said, okay, you can take the flashlight. We had messaged the neighbors like, hey, don't be afraid. There's not a stranger in your backyard. It's just Caleb. And then I was checking our backyard because I thought, hey, I know I'd seen him back here. And sure enough, I walk back to our back of our yard, and there's Squiddy right there sitting on what used to be our shed. And I pick it up and I say, hey, buddy, I found Squiddy. We're good. And he just breaks down in tears because what he had searched for, he was finally able to find, right? And then at camp this past week, when this girl is about to break down in front of me because she's lost her grandmother's ring, having no idea what is going on, I hop on the radio and I say, activities directors, I need to know where you are right now. And they're like, we're coming your way right now. I'm like, okay. They pull up and I say, where are the rings? Which I've said multiple times in a very calm way in a wedding. But in that moment, it was a very serious matter. Where are the rings? And he pulls them out and he says, I have them right here. And I said, so I'm guessing that you took these because you didn't want something of value left in the room. Yes. Because here's the deal. Kids have sneaky little fingers. And he thought, I'd rather it be in a place of authority's hands than a child walking into a room. And I thanked him, and we got that girl her rings back, and she was overwhelmed as well. You see, when it comes to different circumstances and situations in life, when we're desperate for something, or when we so desire to have something back, you can get to the point where you become overwhelmed by your emotions. Anybody ever been overwhelmed by your emotions in a moment because you're so desperate, or you're sick to your stomach because you don't think something's going to work out? And normally in that situation, people do one of three things. There is the worker. There is the person who just relentlessly will not stop until they accomplish or find or see come to pass that which they are desperate for. Are there any workers in the room? Right? I'm a worker. It's just like I'm going to do everything I can to make sure it happens. Then there are possums. This is a term that I made up and has been coined in my family. There are possums who, when they get overwhelmed, they play dead. They reach a certain point. And listen, Julie's a possum. She reaches a point where she has tried, and she says, I'm done. I just want to curl up in a ball in my bed, and it'll figure itself out. Any possums in the room? Anybody willing to admit you're a possum? Yeah, we got some possums in the room. You know, and obviously there's middle ground between the two, but normally that's kind of where we land. But today what I want to push us towards is understand that there's a third thing that we should be doing, and that is pursuing when we're in a circumstance of desperation. You see, when Caleb couldn't find Squiddy, he continually came back to his parents because he knew, I may not be able to find Squiddy, but I know mommy and daddy will be able to. That girl and her room leader said, you know what, I've done what I can, but I know if anybody's going to be able to move mountains at camp this week, it's going to be JT, which that's what everybody calls me. It's going to be JT, so I'm going to go to him. And sure enough, obviously in both situations, things were able to work out. You see, they had worked, but they hit a point where they said, it is no longer in my control and I need help, so they instead pursued someone who could make a difference. You guys picking up where I'm going here? Mark chapter 10, beginning in verse 46, it speaks of a man whose life had been altered. We're going to read a story that is found in different Gospels, and the way that the story is written in both comes across a little bit different. Forgive me if I don't remember because I didn't write it down, but I believe it's Luke. He writes about two blind beggars, where here in Mark, he identifies specifically one individual. It's not a contradiction to the story. It's just that one gave a more specific story to a man and one gave a story to a circumstance, right? Because we have different perceptions of the same story. All of you will leave here today thinking different thoughts about what happened today. It's the same thing in the Gospels. Make sense? They don't contradict, just different perceptions. So, then they reached Jericho. So again, where's Jesus? He's on his way to Jerusalem. This is heading towards Last Supper, heading towards his betrayal. Then they reached Jericho, and as Jesus and his disciples left town, a large crowd followed him. So you got hundreds of people hanging out, following him. This large crowd, obviously it's Jesus. He's now been in ministry for a couple years. And wherever Jesus goes, people follow and crowds gather. Why? Because they want to see healings. They want to see demons cast out. They want to see something amazing happen. You know, last night I went to the fireworks here display here in town, and it was awesome. Like, I haven't been to a fireworks display in a couple years because my children, last time we did one, cried. And so now I was like, hey, we want to do this. And so we went, and I was blown away by how nice it was. And sure enough, as the fireworks were getting ready, you saw this crowd begin to happen because they knew it was planned. Fireworks are going to happen at 9:30. Now, first off, they happened at 9:40, and shame on them for not starting on time. But I booed it. Listen, Christina was there. I booed at 9:31. Listen, if you're going to put a timeout, start on time. Number two, for real, the other thing is, when we know something is going to happen, a crowd gathers. So we know fireworks are going to happen. People begin to show up. At 9:15, people are lining up. Around 9:25, concerts winding down, so more and more people start coming out. When Jesus was around, people knew something was going to happen. And as time began to build over and over and over, sure enough, Jesus would go to one town, something would happen. He'd go to another town, something would happen. And so now Jesus is in Jericho, and people know Jesus is here. So what happens? A crowd gathers, expecting something to happen. But there was one man that we're going to read about today who was different in the crowd. A blind beggar named Bartimaeus, son of Timaeus, was sitting beside the road. Now, one of the things you have to understand is when it says, which means the son of Timaeus, they're not saying Bartimaeus and they're identifying Bartimaeus as the son of Timaeus. They're actually giving you the meaning of his name. The meaning of Bartimaeus' name is son of Timaeus. He has no unique name of which to identify him other than the fact that he is the child of his father. His identity and his name is tied to his father, which in some situations is like, oh, that's cool. But in a lot of times, I should say oftentimes in life, when our identity is tied to a person or tied to a position or tied to anything that you want to tie your identity to, what ends up happening when that thing is gone, it destroys us. People who tie their identity to their wealth, and then everything falls out from underneath of them, and they have no hope because their identity was found in their finances, not in God. For someone who their identity is tied to an individual, and then something falls apart, and everything comes crashing down. One of the things, Julie and I were walking around this past week, and Zoe had written a card and all these other things, and what we're realizing more and more, and our children are actually speaking about the fact that mommy and daddy love God more than they love each other. And some of you go, what? For me, I go, thank God that my children know that I put him first above her. And now listen, all you know, if you don't know I love my wife very, very much. But I love Jesus more. And what that does is that brings things in proper order so that my identity is tied to him more than it is to her. Though part of my identity, for sure, because we are married, is tied to my wife. To become one, right? But my identity is first and foremost with Jesus Christ himself. And so when we have these identity crises, oftentimes what we have to recognize is that if you have an identity crisis, oftentimes it's because your priority and where you place your identity is not in the proper order. I am a pastor, but first I'm a child of God. I'm a pastor, but first I am a husband. Before that, I'm a husband. I'm a pastor, but before that, I'm a father. Then I'm a pastor. If you were to come to me one Sunday and be like, Pastor, you've been blowing it for the last few months, and we're done with you, I'd be like, peace out. I'll go find some more people. Why? Because my identity is not tied to what I'm doing. It's tied to Jesus, and I know what he's called me to. So when we place our identity in the wrong thing, it can lead us down a path that's going to destroy us. And so Bartimaeus is this man, and I'm not saying he has an identity crisis. I'm just saying that you personally need to be aware of where you place your identity. But there's something about Bartimaeus that is different. So when Bartimaeus hears that Jesus of Nazareth is nearby, the crowd is around. Bartimaeus is probably, because he's blind, wondering what is happening. And I'm sure because the crowd is there, he's shouting, "Hey, what is going on?" He might be afraid, he might not understand, but somebody finally speaks up to Bartimaeus and says, "Jesus is here." And Bartimaeus begins to shout. That's what it says. He began to shout, "Jesus, Son of David, have mercy on me." This crowd begins to hear this blind man standing in the background because he can't find his way to Jesus. He's blind. He just knows that there's a crowd of people. Jesus is somewhere in the crowd, and so he shouts, "Jesus, Son of David, have mercy on me." But what you have to understand also about the culture of the day is that Jews believed that if you were blind, it was a curse from God himself. And so Bartimaeus is shouting as a blind man, "Jesus, Son of David, have mercy on me." And the crowd overhears this, recognizes it's the blind man shouting, and they say to him, "Be quiet. You're already cursed. Keep your mouth shut. Jesus is up to something and we don't want to miss it." But he shouted all the louder, "Son of David, have mercy on me." I can't imagine the boldness of this man in this moment. He sees a crowd, he knows Jesus is there, and he asks for Jesus because he can't get to Jesus. He can't get there. He can't find his way. He doesn't know who Jesus is. He doesn't know what Jesus looks like. He's blind. So he just says, "Hey, Jesus, I can't come to you, but would you just give me mercy?" Again, in the book of Mark, earlier in this book, we talked about the woman with the issue of blood who worked her way through the crowd just in hopes that she could touch the hem of his garment and believed that she could be healed because of her faith in the authority that Jesus had over her body. She had tried everything. And sure enough, guess what happens? She gets healed because Jesus has the authority. And in this moment, you now have to understand that this man is in a very situation like her. She was unclean, working her way through a crowd of people. This man is viewed as cursed, shouting above a crowd for the attention of the one whom everyone wants the attention of. It would take a lot of boldness. I mean, we have to be honest with ourselves. Chloe, can you throw up that next slide? We have to be honest with ourselves, and that all too often in life, when somebody pushes back on us, I would argue the majority of people, when they're pushed upon, cower back rather than pushing through. You try and you shout, "Jesus, the Son of David, have mercy on me." And then the crowd's like, "Yeah, you know what, be quiet." And you're like, "You know what, you're right, I'm sorry." But Bartimaeus recognizes that he can't see the way, so he continues to cry out to the one who can make a way. Let me say that one more time. Bartimaeus recognizes he can't see the way, so he continues to cry out to the one who can make a way. You see, he might not be able to get to Jesus, but he knows that Jesus can get to him. So he might have a crowd around him who says, there's no way that you're getting to Jesus because you are cursed and you have no hope and you're just a blind beggar, so you stay in your place. But he decides that he's going to be bold, that he's going to step out, and he will continue to push through the adversity that has been put on him by people. Now, for some of you, the adversity you face is from people. People looking at you and saying, why? Why try? Why pray? Why believe? For some of you, it's spiritual forces working against you in your own mind. Why should I continue to pray about this? Why should I believe that Jesus will bring healing? Why should I believe that Jesus sets me free? Instead, rather than cowering back and saying it's never going to happen, step up like Bartimaeus and say, Jesus, Son of David, have mercy on me. I don't care what the crowd says. I don't care about the adversity. I'm going to push through to the one who can make a way in my life. Is this hitting home today? Because I feel like a lot of times, this is what I feel like is happening. I feel like this is where some of you are. Because often when I'm preaching a message like this, you guys will be shouting and getting excited. But today I can hear it and see it in your faces like, yeah. Verse 49, when Jesus heard him, he stopped and he said, tell him to come here. Tell him to come here. So they called the blind man. The crowd changes in a moment. Isn't it amazing how crowds can change in a moment? Why follow crowds? Crowds will change at any moment. Why follow culture? Culture will change at any moment. People look at you and say, hey, you need to change for culture. You need to change with the ways of the world currently. Listen, the way of the world is going to change in the next 5 years anyway. So what's the point? I'm just going to stand for truth and with Jesus. All right. So they called the blind man. They said, cheer up. Come on, he's calling you. Bartimaeus throws aside his overcoat, so he's still wearing clothes, okay? He throws aside his overcoat, jumps up, and he comes to Jesus. Why? Because the crowd has now made a way. He fought through the adversity, and now the adversity has bound to the one in authority, the one who says, no, a way is being made for you, and the crowd must make a way, because the one in authority said it had to be done. You wonder how it's going to happen? Listen, your healing, your breakthrough, your freedom is not going to happen because you worked for it. It's not going to happen because you possumed over it. It's going to happen because you pursue the one who has the authority to speak, and a way is made possible. And guess what? You don't need to know how the way is going to happen. You just have to know that the one in authority has the authority. Bartimaeus pursued the one who believed he could make a difference in his life. My question for you today is, when was the last time that you were as bold as Bartimaeus in your relationship with Jesus? When was the last time you were as bold as Bartimaeus in your relationship with Jesus? That when adversity, again, whether it be mental or adversity, whether it be people, pushed against you, and you said, I'm going to pray through this. I'm going to praise through this. I'm going to continue to believe, and I'm going to stand on God's promises that his ways are perfect and he has the authority. And I believe that as his child, that he is looking after me. And therefore, I will pray and believe that he's going to do what he said he's going to do. So though I might not be able to see a way, I'm going to continue to pray and believe that God will make the way. When was the last time? Or maybe you were bold in a specific circumstance, but over time you were beaten down and beaten down and beaten down, and you just quit. Jesus tells the story of the persistent widow asking a judge for her debt to be, for justice for a reason. Jesus wants us to be persistent in our faith. Don't stop praying. Don't stop believing. Be bold. Be like Bartimaeus. Jesus responds in verse 51, what do you want me to do for you? Jesus asked. My rabbi, my teacher. The blind man said, I want to see. He's not slow with his request. He's not shy about it. He's come to Jesus and requested his presence and his authority to change his life. You see, in our day and age, it's hard for us to fully grasp what a blind beggar in that day looked like, what their life looked like. They were beggars because that's all they had. They weren't getting a job. It was not possible for them. All they had was begging. That was it. And so what Bartimaeus does in this moment by saying, Jesus, Rabbi, teacher, I want to see. What Bartimaeus is actually saying is, listen, I want to see my life changed. I want the circumstance, the problem of my life to change. I'm also willing to accept the responsibility of that change. You see, oftentimes in life, we want a miracle from God, but then we don't want the responsibility of the miracle. Sometimes the responsibility of the miracle is the testimony that we need to share. Sometimes the responsibility of the miracle would be raising a child that we had prayed for, though that may be difficult. Right? Let's be real. There is always responsibility that comes with a miracle. And Bartimaeus knows, as a blind beggar, if I begin to see, my life is not just changed in a moment, but it's changed forever. But what you also have to understand about this situation is that when you look at the grammar and when you look at the Greek in which this was written, Bartimaeus had lost his sight. He wasn't born with it. He wasn't born blind. He had lost it. He knew what it was like to see, and it had been taken away, and he asked Jesus to restore that which was broken. He hadn't given up. He said, I know what life can be. And Jesus, I know that you can make it happen. He's honest with himself. He wants to see a change in his life that's so dramatic that it would flip the current narrative of his life. He says he wants to see. And Jesus says the same thing to us today when he asks you, what do you want? Jesus loves for his children to be honest and open and direct and bold in our requests. Jesus is not afraid of your boldness. Do you understand? I'm going to say it again. He's not afraid of your boldness. It is okay to come to Jesus and say, hey, listen, I have read what you have said, and I'm asking you to do it in my life. It's okay for you to talk to Jesus like that. He understands that. Now, I'm not telling you to talk down to Jesus. I'm telling you to recognize who Jesus is and say, God, you've already spoken this, and so I'm going to live in that, and I'm going to believe that as I pray this, you're already, we sang it earlier, already at work in this circumstance, but I'm going to believe that the fulfillment of that is going to come to pass very soon. Jesus says to Bartimaeus, go, for your faith has healed you. Instantly, the man could see, and he followed Jesus down the road. He can see, and the first thing that Mark writes about Bartimaeus is not that he could see and he went and got a job, not that he could see and he went and celebrated, not that he could see and he went to his family. No. What Bartimaeus did the moment that he could see was follow Jesus. Because when your life is changed by the one in authority and he speaks a way over your life that alters the course of your life, the proper response is to follow. You see, when we actually recognize that Jesus is in authority, it will automatically lead us to follow. Not that Jesus is a genie to fulfill our wishes, but to recognize that Jesus is God, the Savior and Creator of the universe. And therefore, we say, God, I am your child. Jesus, I trust you. Would you alter the course of my life so that I can honor you in how I live in an even greater way? I said it earlier on in my, I'm now I think I said last week, like we've already picked up the check. All my lawsuits are done. And what I've believed this entire time in regards to my back was at the moment that everything was behind me, at that point, at some point, God would heal my back. That's what I believe. I believe that God's going to actually heal my back. But what I also have prayed, and this is a very dangerous prayer, I've prayed, God, may my back hurt as long as it does, that I never forget what it means to be desperate for you every single day. Because when you live with constant pain, there's something about it that pushes you to someone who can do something about it. Because I've had doctors, I've had physical therapists, I've had all these people look at me and say, I can help you, but I can't fix you. So every day when I'm in pain, I just look and I say, Jesus, I need you in this moment. And I've prayed that prayer. Why? Because my relationship with him is more important than my back. And that is a recognition of authority. Bartimaeus was bold in his faith. Worship team, would you come? Bartimaeus was bold with his faith. He was direct with Jesus, and he was honest in his communication. I want to see. My question for you this morning is, what do you want from Jesus? What have you quit praying about? What have you said, I've tried and I've prayed for years, but I just can't anymore? Now here's another thing. And I hate giving qualifiers, but I feel like they're important. There's also a proverb that says, hope deferred makes the heart weak. Am I good now? All right, good. Nope, I'm not good. I'll switch mics. All right, there we go. The other thing we have to recognize is this. There are times when something is done. And when God says it's done, we say, okay, I trust you. There are times in life where you need to move on. Okay? Like I need to speak that. Because sometimes we hold on so tightly to something that we hope for, and Jesus has already spoken over us, like, listen, it's behind us. It's behind you. And a new season is going to begin. So then the bold prayer is, Jesus, would you help me to accept and move forward? Does that make sense? We're going to say this. I'm going to pray, and I'm going to open the altars. And as always, if you want prayer, just stand like a foot or two back from the altar so that I can come and pray with you. If you want to be left alone, just go beyond the corner. If you are okay with somebody laying a hand on you, just come to the front. Jesus, as we sing this song of reflection, I pray that very few of us are singing, and the majority of us are praying with boldness. God, would you stir the fire in us once again that asks with desperation as we pursue you for answers and pursue you for healing and pursue you for direction. God, may you answer and may you lead us and may you heal us. God, would you make a way where we see no way? God, we've worked or we've quit.